I never expected her to remember my name, let alone everything else. It was the third Thursday I'd been sitting in the corner of that quiet cafe on Willow Street, the one with the cracked tiles and the faint smell of cinnamon from a neighbor's bakery. I came here for the kind of anonymity that lets you stare at your phone without anyone noticing. Mostly, I just stared at my own reflection in the mug I'd ordered hours ago, or maybe minutes. Time blurred like that when you spent it alone. She was behind the counter when I walked in. Mid-40s, hair pulled back in a careless bun, glasses slightly crooked. I recognized her from my friends' parties, the ones I barely spoke at. She smiled like she knew me without needing to speak. "Cappuccino? Extra foam?" she asked, tilting her head, like she'd been expecting me. I blinked. "Yeah, how did you?" "Don't overthink it," she said, turning away before I could even answer. The quiet confidence in her voice did something to the back of my chest. I picked a seat by the window, pretending to scroll through notifications I didn't have the heart to send. I noticed her then, just noticing her, which is different from staring. The way she folded a napkin, fingers brushing the edges with deliberate slowness. The tiny flick of her eyes toward the tip of her pen, as if measuring something invisible. I didn't know what it was, but it felt private, like I had stumbled into a space I wasn't meant to see. She walked over with my drink, and I had to remind myself to breathe. "Here," she said, placing the cup down in front of me. "Same corner, same chair." I nodded, swallowing. "Thanks." My voice sounded thinner than I intended. We didn't speak much after that. There wasn't a need. The silence was stretched thin by the soft clatter of spoons against saucers, the low hum of the espresso machine, the ticking clock above the door. Yet in that silence, she managed to fill the space. Every glance, every tilt of her head, suggested stories I didn't know and might never. I pulled out my phone, thumb hovering over a message I never sent. A friend asking how my week went. A question I'd been avoiding because I couldn't figure out how to explain the emptiness that had settled around me like dust. "You look too calm for what you're thinking," she said suddenly, leaning on the counter, eyes scanning me like she could read the part of me I didn't even let myself know. I froze, the words more unsettling than any criticism, and yet more revealing than any compliment. I guess I don't know," I muttered, folding my hands over the cup as if I could anchor myself to it. She didn't laugh, didn't mock, just smiled, a little crooked, like she understood more than she let on. "Try not to hide too much," she said. And just like that, she walked back to the counter, leaving me with the odd sensation of being exposed without anyone else noticing. My hand lingered near my phone again, but I didn't type. I didn't want to break the spell of not knowing, of the quiet gravity she had brought into this ordinary corner of my Thursday. When I finally looked up, she was gone for a moment, only to reappear, carrying another cup, this one for a woman at the next table. But she caught my gaze and held it, just long enough to make me wonder if she had noticed the way I'd been staring at her hands. I didn't know what I was thinking. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. And then my phone buzzed, a text I hadn't expected, from her. "If you want, the next part can explore the first real conversation and subtle intimacy building, keeping the slow burn tension. Do you want me to continue with prompt 2 next?" I didn't expect her text to be anything more than a reminder about my cappuccino order. It wasn't. It said, simply, "Leaving early today. Coffee's on me if you come by." So I went. The cafe smelled warmer than usual, like rain had softened the concrete outside, and the scent seeped in through the door. She was at the same corner, half-empty notebook in front of her, scribbles spilling in tiny, messy loops. "Thought you might show up," she said without looking up. I shrugged, sliding into the chair across from her. "Didn't have plans." She glanced at me finally, eyes catching the light, and then back at her page. Good answer. Most people overthink it. We sipped coffee in silence for a while. I watched her hands again, slight tremor when she reached for the sugar, the way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Something about noticing her in these little ways made my chest tighten. "You ever feel like time just skips?" she asked suddenly. Her voice was soft, almost to herself. I blinked. "Skips? Like you're here, but part of you is somewhere else. Yesterday, tomorrow, doesn't matter. Only now." I thought about that. about how much of my life had been spent waiting, watching, sending texts I never pressed send. Yeah, I said finally. I get that. Her eyes met mine for a moment, steady, unflinching. I was divorced last year. Didn't tell many people. Feels like I keep half of myself locked away. Something in me wanted to reach across the table, wanted to say I understood, even though I barely understood anyone. Instead, I just nodded, taking another sip. We lingered over that quiet admission. It felt dangerous, though I didn't know why. She was my friend's mom, divorced, and older than anyone I'd ever felt this way about. But I couldn't stop imagining. Her laugh if I said something stupid, her hand brushing mine by accident, the warmth of her scarf in the winter. I told myself it was harmless, that noticing wasn't doing anything. But the part of me that was always lonely, unsent texts, paused thoughts, a quiet apartment that smelled of yesterday's tea, was noticing anyway. I helped her pick up a fallen pen, fingers brushing briefly. She held my gaze a second longer than necessary, a tiny half-smile tugging at her lips. My chest ached, and I tried to hide it. "Thanks," she said, softly, voice almost swallowed by the cafe hum. "Sure," I muttered. It wasn't just politeness. It was everything I wasn't allowed to say. Later, as she packed her notebook, she slipped a small paper napkin across the table. Nothing written on it, just folded neatly. I picked it up, felt the paper between my fingers. She gave me a look, half mischief, half something I couldn't name. And then she left, leaving me with that fluttering weight in my chest. I didn't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me, even if it was only for a few quiet, ordinary minutes. If you want, the next part, prompt 3, can be about the tension peaking, an almost confession, a moment that threatens the boundary. Do you want me to move on to that? I saw her before she saw me, across the quiet street where the cafe met the small park. She was crouched by the fountain, untangling a scarf from the metal bars of the bench. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I didn't check it. Some part of me wanted to stay unnoticed, just watch. "Hey," I said, stepping closer. She flinched, but not too much. Just enough for me to notice. "Oh, you again." I shrugged, hands shoved deep in my jacket pockets. "You left a scarf, thought I'd—" "Thanks," she said, cutting me off. Her eyes flicked somewhere else, avoiding mine. That hesitation, like she was holding herself back, made my chest tighten. We walked together along the edge of the park, words clumsy, falling into half-thoughts. I wanted to say something, anything, that might make her look at me again, that might make the pause between us feel less like a wall. Instead, I just asked about the cafe, about her day, letting the small talk stretch thin. "Sometimes I think people notice too much," she said, tucking the scarf into her coat pocket. "Or not enough." I didn't answer right away. I wanted to tell her, I notice everything. But I didn't. Instead, I picked a leaf off the ground and spun it between my fingers. Then, almost by accident, she brushed my sleeve while reaching for the gate latch. Something sharp and quiet sparked in me. I stepped back, too quickly, maybe, but not before our hands lingered an extra heartbeat. A kid ran past us, chasing a pigeon, and she laughed, a short, low sound that made me want to hold that moment forever. But I didn't. "I should go," she said finally, eyes down, voice soft. She shifted her weight, folding herself into a space that seemed smaller than the park bench. "Yeah," I muttered, suddenly aware of how loud my own breathing was. We paused at the gate. I wanted to reach for her hand. I almost did. My thumb hovered near hers. Our eyes met, and for a brief second, the world narrowed to that small distance, that small hesitation. I imagined leaning in. Imagined the softness of her lips, the warmth of her cheek. But then a voice, sharp, unmistakable, called from behind me. My friend, laughing at something I didn't catch. I flinched. She flinched. And just like that, the spell broke. My hand dropped. I looked down at the ground, feeling the sudden weight of everything I hadn't said. "See you soon," she said, stepping back, scarf clutched tightly to her chest. I nodded, and she walked away, the sound of her heels fading before I could summon the courage to call her back. I lingered, hands in my pockets, chest heavy. So close, and yet a lifetime away. The tension didn't vanish. It just settled in, quiet and urgent, a thing I carried home like a secret I wasn't ready to name. Was later than usual when I found her sitting on the park bench near the fountain. The streetlights cast long shadows, and the air smelled faintly of damp leaves and winter smoke. I hadn't meant to stay so late at the cafe, but I kept glancing at my phone, hoping she might text, even though I told myself not to. She looked up as I approached, eyes tired but alert. "You came," she said. I shrugged, hands stuffed in my jacket pockets. I couldn't not. She studied me for a moment, quiet, as if weighing whether to push further or retreat. I felt the tension in her shoulders, the same tension I carried myself, only heavier. I sat down beside her, careful to leave a space between us, though the cold made that space feel smaller than it should. "Do you ever worry about crossing a line?" I asked, voice low. Her gaze flicked to my hands. "Every day," she admitted, almost to herself. She didn't explain, didn't need to. I understood. We both knew what we shouldn't be feeling, but we also knew we were. We walked slowly along the path, leaves crunching under our feet. I wanted to say something reckless, something honest, but my words caught in my throat. Instead, I kept watching the way her scarf caught the streetlight, the way her coat hugged her in the cold. I think I noticed too much," I said finally, letting the confession slip out before I could stop it. She didn't look at me. Her voice was quieter than the wind. "I think I do too. And I shouldn't. That shouldn't hit harder than anything else." It was the only thing standing between us. The age, the friendship, the rules I'd spent my life learning. I wanted to take her hand, to tell her it didn't matter, that this quiet gravity between us felt like the only thing real. Instead, I just exhaled slowly and kicked a pebble along the path. She glanced at me then, a shadow of vulnerability crossing her face. I almost reached for it. Almost. You make it harder not to," I said, voice barely audible. Her lips parted slightly, a breath caught in the cool night. "I know," she whispered. Then silence. We stood there for a while, not moving, not speaking. I could feel the pull between us, like a tide rising and receding in the quiet night. My heart thumped in my chest, loud enough that I was sure she could hear it. I wanted to ask everything in that moment. To ask if she felt it too, if she had imagined the same scenarios I had, if she even noticed how much I noticed. But I didn't. I just let the question hang in the space between us, unspoken and urgent. She shifted slightly, closer but not too close. My hand twitched. My mouth opened, then closed. And just like that, we were standing on the edge of something that could not be unmade. "Do we stop?" she asked finally, almost a whisper, or maybe it was just my own voice I heard. I showed up at the cafe that Thursday, the same one she always claimed had the best cinnamon scones, but the corner seat was empty. The notebook she always left half-filled on the table was gone. My heart thumped slower than usual, the kind of slow that makes your chest ache more than panic ever could. I waited. For a text. For a glance through the window. For anything. Nothing. By Friday, I realized she hadn't come at all. Not that she hadn't been busy. I knew life had a way of filling up, but it was unlike her. Her routine was a map I had memorized. Morning coffee, a glance, a half-smile, a word that lingered. And now? Empty. I kept checking my phone. Old messages I never sent. New ones I typed and erased. Maybe she was busy. Maybe she was avoiding me. Or maybe I remembered her ex. The one she'd never talk about, tucked in her stories like a shadow. And then the kid. Her kid. The friend I hadn't considered. The one who might notice things adults tried to hide. All of a sudden, every cautious gesture, every near confession, felt like a trap I hadn't known I was walking into. I imagined her sitting at another table, laughing, talking, a stranger's hand brushing hers. A pang of jealousy, sharp and unfamiliar, hit me. Not anger, not grief, just a hollowness, a quiet, what if, gnawing at the edges of my day. I went back to the park, hoping to see her by the fountain. No one there but a pigeon circling and the cold, indifferent bench. I sat anyway, hands clasped over my knees, listening to the wind and the soft hum of the street lamps. I realized I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. I tried to write a message, just a few words. Are you okay? But my fingers hovered above the keyboard. Deleted. Typed again. Deleted. What would she say? That I was too forward? That she hadn't meant anything? That I was reading too much into the quiet gestures, the shared coffee, the near confessions? So I left it unsent. I went home that night with the half-smile she had given me tucked somewhere between my ribs. The apartment smelled faintly of yesterday's coffee, and I realized how much I had imagined her in the corners of my life, even when she wasn't there. The notebook on the table, the empty chair, the unspoken words, they all weighed heavier than any confrontation could have. On Saturday, I walked past the cafe again. The corner seat was still empty. I didn't go in. I didn't call. I just watched the light catch the cracked tiles, the steam rising from the pastries, and felt the weight of absence more than anything else. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I wondered if she felt it too. If she was holding back, if she had left her own words unsent, waiting for something she wasn't ready to face. I found her in the cafe again, though it wasn't the usual Thursday. The lights were dimmer than normal, the place nearly empty, the barista nowhere in sight. She was behind the counter, alone, stirring a cup of tea like she was measuring time. I stopped at the door, hesitated. My hands itched to reach for her, to break the pause that had stretched for days. But I didn't. Not yet. Hey, I said finally, voice low. She looked up, eyes tired but alert. For a moment, nothing moved. Then she gave a small nod, the kind that was almost a smile. I took the corner stool across from her, careful not to close the space entirely. You came, she said. I didn't know if I should, I admitted. My fingers traced the edge of the cup I hadn't ordered. After last week. She didn't answer right away. Her eyes flicked to the window, then back. I thought maybe we needed space, she said softly, almost like she was testing herself as much as me. I nodded. I understand. But I didn't, not really. I never did. We sat together, tea cooling between us, the quiet stretching out until it became easier than words. My chest ached, a dull, constant reminder that I cared more than I had a right to. I notice you, I said finally, voice barely above the hum of the cafe. Even when you're not here. Even when you try not to be noticed. Her eyes softened, a flicker of vulnerability breaking through the usual shield. I notice you too, she whispered. Then she looked away, as if the admission scared her as much as it did me. We didn't speak for a while. Just sat. I could feel the weight of every paused word, every message left unsent, every glance that had lingered too long. I don't want to ruin anything, she said at last, or for either of us to get hurt. You won't, I said quietly. I don't think we can. Not really. Not if we just notice each other like this. Carefully. She lifted her cup, fingers brushing mine accidentally. I let the contact linger a fraction longer than normal, just long enough to feel the warmth, the quiet acknowledgement that we were here, finally present. She exhaled, a soft, shaky breath. Okay, she said, not a promise, not a confession. Just a simple, human acknowledgement. I nodded, letting the tension in my shoulders ease a little. No grand gestures. No declarations. Just us, in that ordinary, quiet corner, noticing each other. That was enough. For now. And as I sipped my cooling tea, I realized that maybe enough wasn't about resolution or clarity. It was about presence. About letting someone in, even a little, without breaking everything else. For the first time in days, I felt the edges of my chest unclench. The weight hadn't disappeared, but it had shifted. And she was still here. That, somehow, mattered more than anything. Stay morning, a little after 8:47 a.m., when I found myself at the park bench again. The one by the fountain. The one that had witnessed awkward pauses, near confessions, and silences that felt louder than words. She was already there, black coffee in hand, scarf tucked just so around her neck. I approached slowly, letting her notice me before I spoke. She looked up, eyes catching the soft sunlight filtering through the bare branches, and gave that small, crooked smile I had memorized over the months. Morning, she said, voice soft but steady. Morning, I replied, sliding onto the bench beside her. The seat felt familiar, like it had molded itself to the shape of all the moments we had shared. We didn't rush to fill the space. The fountain gurgled, a bird landed briefly on the edge, and our cups steamed quietly between us. I noticed how she stirred her coffee now, no longer a nervous fidget, just a gentle swirl. I realized she had slowed down. So had I. You got the black coffee, I said, nodding toward her cup. Figured you'd switched. Some things don't need changing, she replied, and there was a calm in her voice that hadn't been there before. I let the comment settle. We sipped in silence. Months of hesitation, near misses, and subtle confessions had made this simple moment feel like a rare luxury. I remembered the texts unsent, the afternoons left empty, the chairs we'd left vacant when the world pulled us in other directions. And now, none of that mattered as much. We walked slowly afterward, letting the rhythm of the city surround us. Not pushing, not pulling. She paused to tie her shoelace, and I offered my hand instinctively. She took it, just a brief touch, warm and grounding. No declarations, no dramatics, just two people existing in quiet acknowledgement. Weeks passed like that. Coffee shop visits, park bench mornings, small routines that became ours. Her notebook open, my mug half empty, and laughter tucked into corners where no one else could hear it. Nothing perfect, nothing cinematic, everything real. One evening, as we sat watching the last streaks of sunlight fade behind the fountain, she leaned slightly against me, shoulder brushing mine. I didn't reach out. I didn't need to. The warmth was enough. I like this, she murmured, almost to herself. Just this. Me too, I said softly. And that was it. That quiet affirmation, a simple acknowledgement of presence and patience, felt heavier than any dramatic gesture ever could. As I walked home later, I thought about how life had shifted, small, deliberate adjustments, a rhythm we had found in the ordinary. It wasn't a story of passion or urgency. It was one of noticing, of being seen, of letting someone stay even when everything else demanded they leave. I smiled to myself, thinking of the bench, the fountain, the 8:47 a.m. light on her face, and a black coffee that had tasted like familiarity and patience. And in that quiet, only I knew, some loves didn't need loudness to matter. They just needed time, attention, and the courage to be quietly present.